I don't know how to start this podcast. I've never had Mike on the podcast, so I'm a little nervous.
Hello.
Probably introduce.
You should probably ask me questions
Yeah, I'm
about
gonna
myself.
ask. What's your name? All right. We're gonna get serious. We're gonna get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dog Tribe podcast. Today we're back to the studio. Come on, hold it together. Scott won't let me finish his introduction. Okay. All right. So we're back in the studio, and we have Scott Sharfman back. Right again, You've been here a couple times.
Yeah.
And then we have our guest, Michael Graham.
Hello.
How's it going, Mike?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good. I feel like I haven't seen you. I've seen you recently.
No, I don't think so.
I've not seen,
I don't think so.
I've not seen you
It's
recently.
been a couple months. Super Bowl.
No.
Super Bowl, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the last time you cared enough to come see us, yeah.
When's the Super Bowl?
First weekend of February.
Okay. That's good. Okay. All right. So that was, a couple months. All right.
Couple months,
We've
yeah.
all been busy though. We've been busy. I feel like
Yes.
we've been running around. You guys are doing seminars now, right? Out and about doing stuff.
Yeah.
You were in Alaska for a couple of days, and then you guys are heading to
Going to New Jersey next.
New Jersey next.
New Jersey.
And Toronto,
Toronto, yeah.
in July.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How did you guys get going with like the seminars? I know you've done a couple.
Yeah, I've done a few.
How are they looking now? I mean, I see like they're pretty active.
I mean, I'm super excited about what we're going to be doing, for the foreseeable future because Scott was going out to Alaska, some stuff happened. Somebody was supposed to go with him and then, that couldn't happen. And I was kind of next on the docket as far as going out there and teaching some obedience, So it was just planned to go out there, teach some obedience, have him decoy, that whole shebang. But we ended up really jiving together and, doing the thing out there, and we really worked well together. So we were just like, hey, fuck it, let's do this more as much as we can. So
That's awesome, dude. That's really awesome. I mean, I feel like I told Brittany a couple of weeks ago that I wanted to get you on the podcast for the episode today is do's and don'ts of PSA. Right.
Which part did you want Mike on the podcast?
I wanted both. Because we trained for a little bit.
Yeah.
We trained for a couple of years together. And I feel like there was an evolution of training over the years. Obviously we had I was doing a lot of obedience with my dogs. And obviously when we started training together, I realized the grit that needed to be developed in some of the dogs that, I was working and developing, including my own dogs. Before we get into all of that, I really want to know about your background for the audience. You were in PSA for a while. You've been in the podium. You've done a lot, and so obviously you've had your journey with Uther. So I wanted to hear about that and kind of go into a deep dive of what you learned with it, because that's what's important. We talk about that all the time. We work really young dogs all the time. And over the years, you've collected a ton of experience. At any time we do a PSA, prep training weekend. When, you're the one that's judging me and telling me, hey, do X, Y, and Z, you're telling me the points, you're telling me where, kind of the areas where you see I need improvement, and everything always makes sense. And obviously that comes from experience, right? So
right. I wouldn't say I had a bunch of success. I just had, I've had my big ups and my big downs, right? But just a little bit about me and how my training journey has begun and where it's at right now. I started... This is probably my 10th year, I believe, of training dogs. And as soon as I got into dog training, I kind of stumbled into PSA and decoying and stuff like that. So yeah, I've been involved in some way or another with PSA or dog sport for the past 10 years. My main dog that I've had success with, like you mentioned, is my dog Uther. Our successes together, 2018, we had a bunch of nice first place finishes at a couple club trials. We placed at regionals. We had a nationals podium placement. So we did really well in 2018. And from there, that's where we kind of got stuck. And that's where a lot of the don'ts you're going to hear today come from, is all of me making all of the mistakes I made as soon as I got that little taste of, success. Right. And, it's not like I haven't done anything since then, right? I've really focused on teaching people. That was something I was pretty bad at when I started dog training. So I really wanted to soon as I got a little bit of success with Uther and like my own training improved it a little bit, I was like, okay, I really need to hunker down and teach people and learn how to spread the information, right? So I've trained a couple certified decoys. I've coached a handful of people to some nice showings, some regional finishes and stuff like that, some national showings that are pretty respectful. So it's not like I've been completely gone from it since
Yeah, I don't think so at
2018,
all,
right?
no.
So I've showed Uther in the twos quite a few times and failed every single time. But that's where a lot of the things that I teach people today come from, is just everything that I fucked up with that dog. We can get into that a little later, but yeah, that's pretty much the
Yeah.
gist of the
Because
journey.
I think that there's a lot of like content out there on all of the step-by-step process of like, this is what you should do. This is what you should do to train your dog, to develop it start to finish. But there's so many ins and outs of, training specifically in the bite work. And one of the questions that we got was like, how would you do the bite work start to finish, And so kind of focusing back on a little bit on Uther, like, what do you think has been some of the challenges of the twos for you? Because obviously you've showed them, like you said, you showed them a ton of times. Like, what are the things that you've taken away from all these showings that you would advise other competitors, and some stories obviously would help on, in the field and
So-
what you experienced there.
As far as like things to do, that's pretty tough, right? Like nowadays, there's tons of people who have an actual clue as far as like how to develop a training plan for PSA. So the do's for the most part are pretty subjective as far as, who you're asking, what the dog is, whatever. I've been taught from the beginning, like, really don't think about, oh, I'm doing PSA with this dog. I just kind of take a dog and I want to build it into a nice dog that I would like to have, right? So I take this dog and I'm like, okay, I know I want a personal protection dog first, and then, I dabble in sport with them and have fun. So I kind of approach it like that in a sense, right? So and that leads into what to me a personal protection dog is, right? And a lot of the things we do in PSA is pretty transferable. Like, I want my dog to have solid environmental exposure. I want them to have a nice grip. I want them to have all these things that are required in PSA, basically, But yeah, that's kind of a loaded question as far as like, oh, what do you want? Exactly the do's and don'ts, right? The do's as far as like just approaching the sport to me are more of like a bigger umbrella. It's just like, do definitely find a club that fits your needs and everything, and can get you where you want to be, whether you want to be like just a dabble in there as a weekend warrior, or if you think, oh, I want to, go to regionals, go to nationals, be like a high level competitor, go to a club that's churning out high level competitors or has in the past or whatever, so you gotta kind of find what you want.
What are some of the expectations you guys are having these days for club members? Because obviously Warhammer is pretty, it's very active. I would say you guys are training all the week. I mean, at least I see him, and you guys are driving around doing all sorts of stuff. So when people are like looking at clubs and finding clubs, what are some of the expectations that I would say the clubs would have for them in terms of like, all around, whether it's dogs or participation or anything? What are you guys doing these days? Because you've been part of a lot of different clubs. Obviously, we had a club here, and then you've been, plenty across the states. So what are you implementing now is in terms of like the Warhammer working out club, and, what your expectations are of that?
So that's another kind of tough one. Right now, I care more about like being able to spend time with a person, right? Like I've been in clubs where the first priority in the club is the dog. Like if somebody has a good dog and they can train it and they can go on to show well, then congratulations, you're in the club. I've noticed I've been in probably 7 or 8 clubs, and I've ran 2 or 3 of them by now. That number is, give or take, but I've noticed I need to be able to just hang out with somebody, right? That's why I love the club that, I and we, for the most part, right? Like Scott has been a big help in really we're creating a culture, right? And you as well. Like it's just kind of this whole part of the Midwest. We're trying to create that culture.
I'm just not an honorary club member.
Yeah,
But-
you're an honorary club member.
Quarterly visits.
Yes. But still, we're like,
Right.
I feel like, you know, us three are pretty responsible for like trying to create a good dog training culture in
Right.
this part of the country, right? But as far as your question, like what I'm expecting from my club members,
And like
I
people
just,
that want to get in the sport, because
Yeah.
we get questions all the time.
so
like, what's
I
the
want my
expectation?
club members to show up when I tell them to, right? You're basically the only one that, you know, doesn't obey that.
Honorary club member. Honorary.
And obviously there are requirements for the dog. Like I don't mind if we have some projects. I don't mind if like I have to work through some stuff with certain dogs, you know. I just want to even that out with like the handlers. I don't want to say vigilance, but like the handlers oomph towards like what they want to do, right? If the handler's really involved and they really want to succeed with this dog or like do the best for their dog, and they're also realistic that like the dog's, you know, might not be the best dog in the world or whatever. As long as they will follow a training plan and like show up on time, I don't care, you know? And obviously I can hang out with you for like
Right.
8 to 9 hours a day.
No, definitely. I think touching on some like, I guess more recent leadership things for me is that the people that you're working with in or around you are probably the most important piece of what you're trying to accomplish. And I would
100%.
say like being able to get along on training plan. Oh my God, specifically on training plans.
100%.
You know, there are just times where you just don't agree on things. And then whether you like it or not, that's going to roll over into training sessions. That's going to disrupt training sessions, you know, especially when you get a lot of trainers together and you're doing trial prep and you have people that are like, you know, I'll do it because, you know, I am, you know, obligated to help, but I'm not doing it because I agree with
Yeah.
it. Right. And I think that does affect the session.
Yeah, I mean, basically everybody in our club is a dog trainer. You know, what is the 2 dog trainers agree on, right? What the third is doing wrong,
Right,
Right.
right.
So like it's kind of, it does have that vibe sometimes. Like it's always going to. I feel like if you got a bunch of dog trainers around, there's going to be, you know, you're going to be judged mildly by the other ones. You know, it's just about, you know, if there is something to judge, if there's something of a concern, like we bring it up. That's my thing with the club as well, is just like transparency. Like
Right.
if you have an issue with something I'm telling you to do, then tell me.
Right.
You know, don't wait like 5 or 6 weeks, kind of half-ass do what I'm asking you, and then it's just like, oh, why aren't you making progress? And then you get upset and I get upset, and it's just a whole thing.
Right.
I want to try to avoid that, you know. But yeah, that just goes back to find a club that fits you. If you know what the training plans are like within a club and you're like, oh, that's pretty strenuous, or like, I don't know how to do that, and they're not teaching me how to do that, or, you know, any version of like, oh, I might not be able to follow this training plan.
Right.
You might want to seek help elsewhere, right? Because I mean, just having a training plan for somebody in general is a green flag, is something not a lot of clubs do.
Right.
So, you know, on that note, that is a do, you know, it's like look for
Have a
that,
training
look for somebody who is, you know, active in the training, a club director that isn't just like sitting back and be like, you know, pointing fingers and like barking orders at people when, you know, times only when it's stressful, right? You know, I see a lot of people just kind of sitting back and waiting till things kind of fall apart to be like, you know, start barking orders and stuff. And that's me included. Like I've like I've said before, I've probably done everything wrong that you could. And I've ran, one of my previous clubs I ran it pretty much like that, right? Just on the verge of a burnout, and I was like, oh shit, you know, just hanging out, waiting for people to you know, to mess up their training in some sort of fashion, and then as soon as they mess it up, that's when I'm just barking at orders at them,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever.
When it's like shit's in the fan.
Yeah, instead of like preemptively being like, okay, this is how we can prevent that. I see this happening. Like I'm a dog trainer. I can see things happening, you know. So why not say it? Why not plan for it and all that stuff?
What are the red flags for people looking at clubs? Because you get a lot of that in PSA. I mean, at least you see it in the Facebook groups. What are like the red flags in terms of people looking to get in the clubs that if they see that, maybe they should be like, look elsewhere?
A training director that hasn't titled a dog. Personally, that's like the biggest red flag, right? That's really one of the bigger ones as far as like the training goes. If your club director or the people in charge and the people in club haven't titled a dog in the sport, and your goal is to be a top level competitor, you might want to look elsewhere. Right. Because if everybody's kind of at the ground level together, you can grow, like you can grow together, but inevitably there are growing pains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That kind of,
I mean, that's what Chi-Town Canine was for some of their earlier stages. It was just that. It was just a bunch of people growing together, but then it was like the constant of like, well, we have different opinions and you have different opinions, and and so different trainers with less experience had different opinions. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, and then the answer to everyone was like, well, no one's titled a dog, right? That was the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's usually a big issue.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Especially when you have individual thinkers. Like that's just the people I end up being around is just people who are, thinking for themselves and relatively intelligent people. So you get, you try to create this community, and then, oh, boom, there's a bunch of intelligent free thinkers in the room, and then like clashing is gonna happen at some point if there's like a little, I don't want to say power struggle, but and
I do think as well, like aside from just the training, as far as like self-awareness and like accountability, I think are really important. I think if you have a bunch of people who are kind of like what Mike said about how you want to balance the dogs and the handlers, if people are not aware of whether it's their skill, experience, kind of level of aptitude or their dogs, I think that's just always going to be strenuous.
Right.
Because whether it's someone, they think they've got like a monster on the end of the leash, they really don't, and they can't see that or understand that or aren't willing to have that conversation, that's always tough. And then accountability as far as like, one, just like be on time, do the things that you have to do to succeed, make progress, but also like accountability as far as like taking care of yourself, taking care of the animal, taking care of your equipment, things like that.
Yeah,
I think,
those are big ones.
And, like Mike and I have traveled a lot now. And I mean, I've been kind of all over now since I've been back. And especially getting here, being like, okay, I'm going to train here. And, maybe like we'll see kind of these different people who are training in the region. I'll go around, I'll train with different people, do trials, whatever. Seeing kind of like the different standards that people are willing to accept as far as like if someone shows up to club and they've got, dogs living in a van, it's a little bit gross, dogs aren't in great shape, nails scratching the floor, they smell like piss, whatever, like things like that. Like if you're cool,
the basic.
If you're cool with that and you're a club director who's allowing that, you're basically like broadcasting to everyone else, like, hey, this is fine.
Right.
Roll with your dogs like this if you want. And I think that's, for me at least, like it's not only a signal of like, come on, you just like, don't be a dick, like to the dog, like just be better.
Right.
But also it's a signal of like, it's the same thing as like, wearing clean clothes, being in shape, grooming yourself, having like, having general basic hygiene. Like it means that like you care a little bit. And also like what you're going to go onto the field with your dog who's like,
right. Jerry's big on that. Isn't
Yeah,
it? There's
and-
some rules about that. No.
yeah. And as much as
Do they have no Crocs in the field?
I don't think,
I will not be
I don't
listening.
think that's a rule. I don't think that's a rule.
There should be a rule. I'm just kidding.
But like making sure that, the club has at least like a general moral compass as far as like what's acceptable, as far as like how you keep your animal, how you treat your animal, whatever. But I think there's a little bit of like people forget that when you step onto a field, you are representing your club, your decoys, your club director, your obedience director, whatever it is. And so having a little bit of like self-awareness and then that accountability of like, hey, this isn't just a me thing. This is, like it's a team sport. It takes a village, regardless of how great your dog is, how great of a trainer you are. It does take a village. So making sure that when you're watching people train, you're okay with the things that are happening. You think, that's something that I, think is, a good way to live with your animal, to treat your animal, to, keep your animal, things like that. I think those are, for me at least, like the training is one thing. And I think like being a dog trainer and being, professionals, like you're doing a lot of your training away from club anyway, or you should be.
Right.
So you could have a group that, maybe they're less experienced, maybe like they don't have, a bunch of level 3 dogs. But I think if you're willing to put the effort in, if you're willing to make it work for you and you're willing to do the things necessary to actually progress your own dog, and everyone is, treating the dog the right way, treating their equipment the right way, treating their club members the right way. I think that's baseline. That's got to be happening. And then on top of that, I think is when like the really good training comes into play.
Right, right. Circling a bit back into the dog training side. So obviously you train, we've trained a bunch of different dogs, and you've, throughout the years interacted with a lot of different, trainers, competitors. What do you do differently now that you didn't do back then?
Shoo. Well, when I first started training my dogs, I was on more the heavy-handed side, right? More old school, like,
Yeah.
prong, e-collar, like heavy on the corrections and stuff like that. And I would say like a healthy balance of that and like modern dog training, like, user rewards and, all that type of stuff that everybody has learned for the most part.
The last 5 years, I
yeah,
would say,
like-
with COVID, yeah.
I created some really nice behaviors in my dog, and obviously like it got me some success in the ones and stuff. But as soon as I needed my dog to think more, and I needed my dog to not always be jacked up and act, and like I said, I just think, and I have to worry about his mental state a little more. I realized like I had not been paying attention to how the dog is actually perceiving the stress around him, right? So that's
That's a huge one, perceiving the stress.
like that is a big thing that I stress to a lot of people now, because that's the reason I've been stuck in the twos for I don't know, like 5 years now, right? I just didn't take into account like what stress is, and I didn't, I wasn't that far into dog training to really have that much of forethought about it, right? First off, but as I've grown and realized the mistakes I've made in my dog training, and fixed them with client dogs and stuff, and seen clients have success, I'm like, damn, I really wish I would have really paid attention to the dog's mental state before anything. And that's a big thing I teach. I'm starting to teach more young dogs early. It's not like I'm doing crazy shit with them right away, but I really try to key in on like get the dog to be able to think around stuff and truly understand what stress is. Whether the dog's biting or whether the dog's doing obedience. It's all just stress. It's different types of stress, right? Whether the dog's being driven with 2 can curtains, or the dog's just doing a healing routine with decoys moving around him, right? It's all stress at the end of the day, and the dog needs to know how to, work through that properly without, with more thought and care instead of just hammering the dog through the behavior. So that's a big one. And even today, like so like for an example, when you're teaching a young dog and like you're putting a foundation on a young dog, that's very important, because when the dog gets stressed out, what do? They just fall back on the foundation.
Right.
And that's kind of what I'm still in the habit of doing, right? Whenever things get stressful, I kind of fall back on the things I used to do. And that's another big thing
100%.
I'm trying to remove from my daily life, right? And it's still difficult. We all do it regardless of what it is. And, that is
Dude, just that right there is valuable information, because a lot of people double down on like pressure and stress. And it's like, well, imagine you just, sprinted, quarter mile, and then you have to sit down and start thinking clearly. You're going to struggle with that.
exactly.
Right? And so one of the things that was asked when we put out the questions was, for people that are not part of clubs, right, and they're training by themselves, what are the things that they should be doing at home if they're trying to get a PDC or a PSA 1 in the dog? Because there's a lot of that. I always feel like there's a lot of that in PSA now. There's a lot of people following individual training plans. I mean, we have a couple clients that are like, I don't have time for a club, but like, Min's one of them, and they're showing up and they're ready to pick up where they left off. What are the things that at least you guys mentioned in at least in your seminars, or that you're practicing yourselves now in terms of like training outside of club, that you do to help do well whenever you do show up for the bite work sessions?
Most of that type of stuff is more obedience focused than bite work focused. Like there's obvious things like if you notice like you're playing with the dog and the dog's grip and play is transferring over to bite work, definitely like pay attention to how the dog's gripping the toy and all that type of stuff. Other than that, as far as bite work goes, like leave it to the decoy, unless like, that's like pot calling the kettle black, because I literally built Uther. I built Uther myself, and, and multiple of my other dogs, but I've been doing this for however many years.
And you have a strong protection foundation.
So yes. So, and I learned from very good people, right? But anyway, just as far as obedience, follow your training plan. Like if you're going to go to a trainer, first off, unless you feel like just going to YouTube University and just kind of YOLOing your way through the sport, I will say you could definitely get at least a PDC on that. Like it's a PDC is a walk in the park, So if you just like, I don't have the money to go to a trainer, I have this dog, I maybe go like 1-2 bite work sessions a week, you can get a PDC. Right. I've put ones and dogs that are training in the 2s for just like twice a week sessions. They're just basic clients, but they kept coming and they keep progressing. It's a little slower than people that come to club and come to more group trainings and go to seminars with me. But you make progress if you hold the line and keep doing what you're doing and follow the trainer's plan. You're good as gold.
I also feel like people forget that like bad work is worse than no work. Yes. I mean, when we were in Alaska, there was a guy who came literally from the mountains, and he had this Dutchie who
from the mountains.
Yeah, he was just a mountain man. He had this Dutchie who they said he shows up like once every 4 or 5 months. Definitely one of the furthest along dogs there,
100%
progress-wise. Just because he knew how to teach basic behaviors, he didn't do anything crazy, he didn't push the dog too far, he didn't create any sort of aversion to training, and he had the right dog. Dog comes in, flies around, bites a suit, does all the stuff. Easy sessions. The dog feels great every time it comes to train. He has a great relationship with his dog. And also, like, he's intelligent as far as what he teaches. He knows where his skill set ends. Like, I think if you're going to be training alone, understand what you can do, what you can't do, and don't just, like, mess around with complex behaviors. Especially behaviors where you're using a lot of pressure. Don't just, like, mess around with that. But I do think understanding, like, hey, your dog doesn't need to work all the time. And again, pot calling the kettle black. I work my dogs every day.
You do, but every time, like I remember when we first started working together, you would not bring your dogs out. We'd work them, and then you'd not bring your dogs out, and then like 2 or 3 days later, they'd come around and they're like, got a heel, right? And where they didn't have a heel before. So what do you do specifically as you're training for the ones, or when you? Because you do stuff by yourself, and you do stuff by yourself that you don't tell anybody about. And you show up and you're like, I'm here to decoy dogs, and I'll decoy 25 dogs. But your dogs do get better, right? Even though we're not working in my club, and you don't bring them out all the time. So what are you doing to prep? Because I feel like people can benefit from that specifically.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, like obviously with my background, play is super, super important. That's kind of like the integral part of my relationship to my dogs and their relationship to training. Like that's kind of what ties it all in. So for me, like as I am playing with my dog, which I do every day with all of my dogs, I make sure that there's structure to it, and I make sure that there is cooperation to it. So like if I'm playing with my dogs, it's not just exercise, and I have to be, because I get carried away too, just like kicking a jolly ball, playing tug with my dog, whatever, but making sure that I'm thinking about where did I ask my dog for behaviors in between when I let them back on the tug? Did I break them from that? Did I pay them in behavior? And I think you can get a lot of really, really good reps playing, because as much as I can't simulate the level of arousal that my dog has around a decoy with a toy, I can get close enough. Like I can manufacture that kind of drive, I can manufacture frustration, confusion, over arousal, like keep them on their toes, things like that. So I do think you can get a lot of good reps in, but it's about being kind of aware of what you're doing. Like if I'm playing with my dog, it's not, I'm just going to throw it and then we're going to tug and then I'm going to throw it and then we're going to tug. There's going to be behaviors that I'm going to ask for. But, I think one, like I'm lucky enough where like I think I have the right dogs. Like I think my dogs are good dogs. I like them. I like what they can do. I think they're capable of a lot. And I also think that they're very like affiliative. Like they want to do stuff with me. They're very handler oriented. They understand that like doing stuff with me is fun. And so I get
Did you make that, or is that something that the dogs are kind of like
I
that?
think it's half and half. So like I think, like my dog Esme, like she is like that. Like I think whoever grabs the end of a leash, she's going to be equally as excited about as she is with me. But with my other dogs, like I know my puppy right now, Dump, she was shitty with toys. All she wanted to do was like go away and possess and then like guard them from me. So like Flexi, two ball, whatever it is, like making sure that for me, like if I can teach my dog how to play with me,
Right.
and if that play is not reflective of how they would naturally play, but I can create it, that's something. Like
Can you break that down for people? Because this is something that people will ask probably. It's like, what do you mean by two ball, or what do you mean like? Because that happens all the time. Like when we bring in new people into a club setting or bite night or clients, the dog literally takes something and runs away with it, right? So like, how do you address that stuff specifically for a bite dog? Because people are concerned that they're like, hey, if I correct this behavior, it's going to hurt my dog's relationship with me and he's not going to want to bite, right? Or something like that. So what does that look like for you?
So, and I kind of talked about this in the eval that we had right before this as well, but like any game that you're playing with your dog, like you can break it down into the component parts. So like if you're playing tug, you've got the 4 components of tug. You both have the tug and neither of you have the tug. The dog has the tug, you have the tug. Identifying like what is the dog's favorite part? What is the dog's least favorite part? And then basically just using the pre-mag principle, like making sure that like the least favorite part is always followed by the favorite part, making sure that your ratio of how often you're doing each part is indicative of which part the dog likes the most to likes the least.
Right.
And then setting up your session, physically setting up your session for success. So like if I'm playing with Dumpling, she needs to be on a flexi that's connected to like a belt loop or a tree pouch always, because she will just fuck off. Also, I can't have anything on the ground. Like that's where we're at right now with our play. So when everything is sterile, it's great. Soon I'll start to introduce like a little bit more, kind of distractions in the environment and see if, our play stands up to that. But she's liking it more. She's enjoying it more. And then, your fetch games, the same thing. So like, it's basically just like the prey cycle. They want to chase, catch, kill, consume, but then they've got to bring it back to you and drop it. So like, how can I make that valuable? How can I do that? So like Flexi, essentially, I'm not like forcing them to do it, but like it is compulsion. Like you can't get away from me.
Right.
It's going to bring you to me, and the game is going to stall until you choose to continue it.
Right.
And then
We'll start this again, or
and,
it's gonna take forever.
and like I think about it like, my out in tug, like that's a bell between rounds. It's not the end of the game. I'm not taking it from you. Like I do as many outs with me not holding it as me holding it. I want to make sure like they don't always feel like, and then like I'll out, they can get it. I'll out them, I'm holding it, they can get it. They out, I'm holding it, they do a behavior. So like I make sure to play with those numbers as much as I possibly can. So the dog was always outing, anticipating, whether it's a rebite, whether it's a get it, whatever it is, like they're not feeling like I'm taking something from them, and I'm kind of removing that kind of conflict from it. And then with the fetch is harder with some dogs. Obviously you get some dogs who just want to bring it back to you all the time. Building that, making sure like you've got them on a leash, you can always make them come back if they're not a dog who is ready to be taught and out yet. If they're like a tiny little baby puppy, using the 2-ball, teasing them off of it, making that go dead, making this alive, things like that. Where when I'm playing with my dogs, it flows pretty naturally just because of how much emphasis I've put on that and actually like learning the ins and outs and the mechanics of it. But I think if you can play with your dog well, really play with them well, not just like yes, throw a ball. Or like get it, throw a ball, or like produce a tug and just have them tugging on the end of it, but like really engage with your dog and really make it something fun where you can expand the reward event. You can make sure that like that's a long thing. They can decompress, they can de-stress, they enjoy it, they feel like you're doing something together. I feel like that's really valuable. So I feel like I get more out of less with my dogs, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I get, when I'm doing obedience at home, and it's not like I'm doing anything crazy. Like I'm prepping for the ones with Esme, I'm prepping for PDC with jelly beans. It's not like I'm doing anything like wild.
Right.
But when I'm doing stuff, I would say if my session's 10 minutes, it's like 7.5 minutes of play.
Right. People forget about that. Well, people forget that play is such a big important part of, like training a bite dog. In fact, like how the dog feels about the bite work really comes from play, right? It's like we were just talking about that with the evaluation. Like they're, first of all, they exhaust their dog before they bring it to deal with the stuff, which we talked about. But
they play too much.
They play too much, right? And they really enjoy, and the dog really plays with them. But the dog's never bridged over to then like playing with somebody else, right? And so like the dog's like, I'll play with mom, I'll play with dad, and then but as soon as it's like I want to play with somebody else, they're like, I'm not quite so comfortable with that. I don't want to play at all. right? And I think people forget about that aspect of it's like you can mimic play. You can. Are you drinking again? You can mimic play.
That's gonna get clipped.
It's gonna clip. Zell's gonna like just edit the shit out of this anyway. Anyway, I was just saying that you can essentially mimic a little bit of decoy pressure through play, right? And like you can play tug and then grab a clatter and make some noise while you're playing tug, right? And drop the clatter and go back to playing tug with your dog and releasing the tug. Like that's so much of that. And I think that no one really spends a lot of time with that because it is something we should probably tell our clients about. Like, hey, if you're doing this, like play tug with your dog and do some more activities with that.
I also think there's such a huge gap between like you playing with your dog and then your dog doing bite work.
Right.
But there doesn't actually have to be. I think, whether it's the toys you use, like the materials that your dog is biting, the strength of it, like how they can compress it, all of those things. If you're going to hold it, if it's going to be on a leash, there can be a million different things. And then all of a sudden you start playing with your dog and you play with them on a back tie, or you play with them with a clatter. You play with them and like you really do kind of start to challenge the grip and you start to manipulate the grip into the version of
what you want,
mechanics that you want. Like you can do things where, I know my dogs, like Bagel is a great example. He got off the plane. I immediately played with him. We played for like 24 hours and then he bit and he'd never seen any sort of bite work or anything like that. Like he chased a flirt pole a couple times with his breeder, but nothing real. And I think like he bit and it was pretty good, and there were things that I noticed that like I addressed through play. So like I noticed for him, like he didn't like as soon as something was over his head, and it's like he's 16 weeks old or 15 weeks old or whatever. Like it's not a problem, but I'm saying like, okay, why wait for my one weekly? If I'm not me and I have decoys all the time, if I'm someone who's going to a club, why wait for my club day to address this thing that I can start to do on my own? So like, why can't I play with my dog, clatter, 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 play with my dog, grab their paw, play with my dog, grab their skin, grab their tail, whatever. Like it's me. They should trust me and be comfortable with me the most. I can start to like drip feed in those little stressors and show them like, hey, like this happens while you're playing. Hey, see this guy over here, play with him. Oh, the same thing's happening. Instead of it being like, whoa, new guy, new thing. Whoa, this is so much. This is clearly not play. It's now different. I can bridge that gap with the things that I do. So I think like being cognizant of the way that you play with your dog and also the ratio of like, how often am I, and I mean, you guys, like, I don't use a ton of pressure with my dogs when I'm doing obedience, but like, if I'm going to make my dogs do that stress, even if it's just me in my backyard and we're running around doing fun stuff that they know, if I'm holding them accountable and I'm pressuring them into behaviors and they're making mistakes and I'm holding them accountable for it and I'm correcting them if they fuck off, whatever, like any of those things, like it is stress. So like your stress starts and it builds and it builds and it builds. And if you just like throw the ball, yes, they just run around with it, out, back to the behavior, maybe it's building and then kind of plateauing and then building again. But if you, build it, play, you can end on a really nice note as far as like there's not a ton of cumulative stress.
Right.
And then you get your dog out later in the day, you get your dog out the next day, and they can perform at the same high level because that cumulative stress isn't building.
Got it. That's really good information. How do you guys feel about the statement that you should stick to one trainer specifically or one trainer or one decoy to build your dog
So
at the very beginning of training?
That's actually something that not exactly that. I don't require, everybody in our club to stick with us and only us. I encourage people to go find like reputable people who can further their training ventures.
Reputable people.
Yes.
Reputable.
Reputable.
People.
Good people.
What do you mean reputable? What do you
like people that
searchable on Google or
people that don't set off red flags?
Okay.
Like reputable people that aren't like, catching cases for dog abuse.
Right.
People,
Well, that's just
people that are, then you get to like, oh, maybe people that are succeeding in what they do, people that sound what they know what they're talking about type of situation.
Right.
But yeah, like that's something I kind of have talks with our club members about. Not so much anymore because we're in a rhythm.
Yeah, it's a really good community between the people of Minnesota here.
But when we first started talking, I was like, hey, like if you're gonna go train with somebody else, like I'm putting in a lot of effort with your dogs and you. So if you're gonna go train with somebody else, let me know what's going on, or like let me know who it is so I can not so much approve it, but in a ways approve it, make sure like you're not going to go to somebody who's going to mess up the months of training I just did on your dog.
I mean, I asked for videos of any protection.
Oh yeah, you were saying that. You were saying that.
And it's not, again, like it's not just to like babysit people, but it is also like if you go to someone and they do something with your dog that works.
Dude, that's the worst. We've seen that over and over again where we're like, hey, don't do this. And then like literally later that day on their Instagram stories or something like that, you're like, God damn it. What did we not say?
Yeah.
Don't work your own dog at a back tie. Like,
But then it works. But like whenever you tell them not to, and then they do, and then it works, and you're like, oh, it looks better. It's like, God damn it.
It's only gonna work on them though. I have this like super like I don't know. I think Nick Meyer or other people in conversations come up that to some degree bite work is uncomfortable. Like protection to the dog, right? It is challenging the human pressure, all the stressors, right? If they learn to bite people like their own handler or their primary caretaker, if they're I don't know what your primary caretaker
handler works.
their guardian, legal guardian. No, if they're their handler, they're really comfortable because they feed me, they take care of me. This person's never gonna hurt me. There's this level of trust, right? That they feel super comfortable. And I just feel like some dogs like Malinois are just like they'll bite anything sometimes, but I feel like some dogs
Will they?
Maybe not all Malinois. Some dogs just build this comfort around like, I feel comfortable. Bite work feels cozy, comfortable when I play this game. And it does affect their performance later on.
Yes.
I feel like
100%.
Absolutely.
Yes. That is, like I said, I decoyed Uther for the first like year of his life, but that's because the dog could not give a shit who was like at the other end of the leash. And he's also social. So like I got a really good balance of like, I can work this dog. It's not going to be personal, and he's going to basically perform the same in front of anybody else. But yeah, just like you said, like the dog gets way too comfortable. We say that, and people are going to come out of the woodworks and be like, "Oh, I worked my dog," and so.
Nah, man, they're like, I get it. They're going to say that, but dude, it's just we just see that all the time. You see it all the time.
Like Uther with Mike, it's like there are exceptions to the rule.
Right.
I mean, there's plenty of dogs who are clear enough, high and drive enough, stable enough, social enough, whatever, that like you can work your own dog and it's fine, but like that is a small percentage.
Yeah.
And even if your dog is that dog, they will eventually get complacent. They will eventually get complacent being like, this is my guy, this is how he works me. Right. It's just this way. This is what we do. And then there's also like there's things that you cannot do. If you want to work on channeling, good luck doing that with your own dog.
Yeah.
Have fun. I mean, like, sure, maybe you can have fun, like getting him off the table.
It's going to create a lot of confusion and all sorts of stuff like that.
A lot of conflict. Like I think it's just one of those things where like, if you have.
My dad trains me and then he like chains me up and tries to abuse me afterwards. You know what I'm saying? Like that just makes
like,
no fucking sense.
You're going to like put your dog in defense? Like, no, that's silly. That's
right.
Some people will think they do.
Well, and the dog, there's no way the dog's doing it.
Yeah.
Any stable dog would not,
No. And then any unstable dog, you then are you going to like crate them afterwards? No. That's
right.
But I think as far as like people sticking with one decoy, I think there's like a time frame where it's important to have continuation. I think, the dog is 8 weeks old. They're starting to bite work. They're learning the game. They're learning the rules. They're learning if they even want to play it or not. And I think having things be similar, even if it's different people who work in a similar way, different people who are competent, understand the dog, read the dog that you trust, that's fine. But like, keep it to, a group, a couple people, one person. That's a good thing. For me personally, I like as soon as my dog's like 7-8 months old, and I'm like, okay, I'm seeing the signs I need to see. You're handling things as I would hope that you would. You're taking things, you're taking it all on the chin. You're fine.
Right.
You're doing really well. That's when I want to go out and I want to see a bunch of people, not Joe Schmo with a suit, but anyone that I have access to that I think is safe.
Right.
I'll then go out and I'll say, okay, so my dog's on, say I have a step-by-step progression and it's 10 steps and they're on step 7 with my normal decoys. I'll go back to like step 3, 4, and I'll go around and I'll see a bunch of other decoys. And I'll be like, hey, my dog, let's say my dog just started like getting on the bicep and like pushing nice and kind of taking like a little bit of a drive. I'll then say like, okay, decoy X, Y, and Z, they can do that with my dog. Decoys A, B, and C, back to the chomp. something
Right.
like that, where I'm like, see a new person.
New person, always take a step back. New person, new scenario, take a step back, go back to the chomp.
Yeah.
Go back to like a,
Whatever that step
smooth.
is for you, like in whatever your progression is, I think, if you're thinking about your progression, a lot of it is like, hey, you're here, you're biting. Then we're going to change, your mechanics. Then we're going to change your targeting. Then we're going to change the distance at which you bite it. We're going to remove the opposition. A lot of the time, it's one variable that's changing at a time so that it's digestible for the dog. You're like, oh, it's not that different. I can do this. I know I did this last week and I was successful. I'm good. I'll do that. So if I'm going to change a big variable, which is the other person, sure, sometimes my dogs don't give a shit and it's fine and I can decoy them on whoever and it doesn't matter.
Can I stop you real quick? Push this against your mic. There you go. And
Got it. So sometimes, like, it doesn't matter. My dogs can decoy or get worked by whoever, and it doesn't change what they're doing. But sometimes that's the biggest factor is the person who's doing it,
right.
especially with a young dog where, I'm trying to actually build like a nice relationship between the dog and the decoy. Like some dogs, like it's not a game and it's 100% serious and they want to hurt you. And
Right.
that's all they want to do.
That's a that I don't want to say that's a result, but I said it. There was a dog that came in. You were here. You were here. I don't know if you were in the room at that time. It was a dog, young puppy, and I think as soon as he was with a new handler, and as soon as he was on a leash, he immediately tried to aggress, and he smelled the environment. He was very civil and stuff like that. It was a Dutchie, remember?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, this is a lot of. All right, it was a Dutchie puppy. We're bad at this. We should be doing this. Anyway, dogs like that are,
So there's dogs like
civil.
that, they just want to hurt you. They don't care who's on the other end of the leash. But then there's like with my dogs, like I really enjoy that my dogs, like you slip the suit, they drop it, they cuddle with you, they bring the suit back to you. Like it shows me that they're happy to do the work, they're comfortable, they want to be there. Like that's a good thing for me. I think that's valuable.
Right.
If you don't have that dog, that's fine. Esme does that. Jelly Bean does not do that. They're different dogs. They're both confident in the drives that they're expressing. It's just different. But if I'm going to change a major variable, I have to go back and ensure that my dog
Right.
is successful elsewhere. So like, I think if you have a great decoy, like if you have someone who you really, really trust, who when you look at their dog's bite, you're like, hell
Yeah,
that's what I
that.
want. Or you look at other people's dogs who were trained by that decoy, you're like, that's what I want. Stick with them. And if they're that good, they will make sure that your dog doesn't have a problem with other decoys anyway.
right.
If you're in a new club, kind of a dry area for sport, it's green decoys and green dogs, there's nothing wrong with that. Like Mike said, you can grow together. There's so much information.
Right.
There's so many people who travel. And there's so many people who are accessible now that they weren't before. But, make it a priority to find someone out there who, when you look at their dogs, you're like, oh, fucking hell yeah, that dog's sick. Who built that dog?
Yeah.
I want to know. Go out and find them.
Who built that dog? That's the question. Who built that dog? Who did the grip work? Because you guys are the only two, I would say, in the area, or I would say in general that I would put like a new puppy on, like for me specifically, mainly because it's like we know the same system. We worked around each other for quite some time now, and pretty much up until like, I don't know, 6 to 7 months, like you were saying, that's when we'll keep them on there. Like Agave's at that point. Like Agave's like one more rep from me. I think we did some short sends with her the other day. And, she's biting nice. She's in the harness. She's coming in nicely. So I'm saying, okay, it's time for her to just be worked by other people at this point, right? And then what I would target is people that have a certain presence or dynamic that will also show up on the training field, like in the actual trial field. Hence, I don't know if you've ever seen Mike. I'm sure you've seen Mike, but people that have not seen Mike charge a dog on a Kurtz test or a tag on handler, that's a scary scene. I want to run.
No, 100. That's hugely valuable. I
Right.
don't think people understand that.
Yeah, like you
I
got
know,
some different people.
like with Bale, I have zero. Anyone can work that dog. I'm not saying he's like the biggest banger of all time. I'm not saying he's the greatest dog in the world. I'm saying like presence wise, it's not a problem.
Right.
And that is like your decoys have to, I get that not everyone is, has like the stature or the physique or the presence or the vocals or, the
Right.
speed or whatever. Like I get that. But, it's important to make sure that like the decoys you're working with, like can show your dog those different pictures.
Right.
And how they manipulate their body, how they move, how they bring pressure, whatever it is, like making sure that your decoys are the right decoys for your goals and the right decoys for your dogs. Like I think if you're going to build a dog in the sport, you know, anyone can teach their dog, you know, anyone can teach their dog obedience. Like, that's not to diminish obedience. I'm not good at it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
He's like, everyone but me.
but like, I mean, my dog's like no shit. But
They
whatever.
do know
But
this.
like, you know, anyone who is going to put the work in, put the time in, invest their energy in it, they can teach their dog. Any dog that's got like some food drive and some ball drive, they can teach it a lot of obedience. The bite work, that's so dependent on other
Yeah,
people.
it's a whole other thing. It's
Like,
not the same.
And it's so hard because I mean, like when we were up in Alaska, like we're looking at their decoys, and I mean, fucking God bless them. Like it's just there's
Bless them.
like there's nothing out there.
Right.
It's just like they're learning from like old police decoys
Right.
and YouTube. Like that's what it is. And
Right.
like, you know, they've got all the gear and they fucking do the damn thing. I mean, like they do it, but it's those dogs look one way with them, and me and Mike showed up and it was a reality check, I think, for a lot of the dogs.
Yes.
And that's not to say like
Yeah.
we showed up to run dogs.
No. I mean, I've been on the other side of that where it's
Yeah.
just like I bring my dog out and it's like, oh, even Gino, I think when he was so underexposed that he was up so big and bad, but as soon as you bring him into a room of like 50 people for the first time, he was just like, he'll get going, but you can tell there's a level of franticness just because of like the environment.
Yeah. That's the line we toe though. Like we are talented enough. We are talented enough to show up somewhere, make a dog look good.
Right.
But we have to toe the line between, I don't want to all the way, like, just be like, oh, your dog's amazing. Yay. Wonderful. And like you were saying about Alaska, like if we were these, ego driven maniacs, like we would have went in there and like, it would have been like a bad time for those people, but we toe that line. Yeah, maybe. But we toe that line. Like we let people know what the issues are within like their given venue. And then, like give them plans. But like what he was saying and tagging on to everything, like it's also very important to me to have somebody that I can communicate with, like having him in club to like our styles just kind of meld together, like in the first place. But our ability to communicate is something I've never had. We have a couple dogs that I started building as puppies. Everything's going great. We got to that point where it's like, oh, let's get them on other decoys and stuff like that. And I didn't really have to say shit. I was like, Scott, work this dog. He worked the dog perfectly. It was fine. Right. I just was like, oh, take some steps back. Like this dog started biting a suit like yesterday. Let's maybe put a sleeve on and, do the little things. Take a couple steps back, and it went great. And that's another green flag to look for, is like people who are communicating. And it's not like we don't have the same style. We decoy pretty differently a lot of the time and have a different approach to it the majority of the time. But still, I can go up to him and be like, hey, like I've been working this dog for however long. This is what's been working, and he's going to take it and do it his own way, but not to like a fault. He's not going to, there's no ego behind it. He's like, okay, this has been working for the dog. I understand what that means. And like, I'm going to kind of do my own spin on it. And that is like a beautiful thing. And that's why we're doing seminars now together, because we can do that. And it's like it's easy. It's easy. It's a fresh breath of air. And that's even like the best clubs around. Like it's hard to find that.
No, 100%.
It's really hard to find that.
Circling back a little bit on the bite work for you, Mike, what is your progression for progressing a puppy now? And what do you recommend for people? What is the safest way? Because you've seen a lot of different things.
Yeah, just a puppy.
Just a puppy to young adult.
Yeah.
Because those are the formative years. Like what if you like, I've always kind of now I realize that honestly the first grip or the first few grips that a puppy or dog gets, especially in the sleeve, they matter a lot, right? It's just like when you hit the clicker for the first time, or when you first marker or reinforce behavior, like that first bite, what it looks like, what the dog feels, and then the several smaller ones after that, they're probably the most impactful.
So I would say, tagging off of that, like most people know, start with a rag. Like I want to make sure my dog can chase, catch, and hold on to like the most basic thing, right? And as soon as I know the puppy can do that, I'm moving on to a puppy sleeve. And And it's just, you kind of tackled it right there. Like that, I want to make sure every rep that puppy has means something. You know, I don't want any real like negative interaction between me and this puppy that is going to be seeing me for hopefully like the rest of its life. You know, if it's like a club member that
Right.
I'm going to be around for a long time, this dog's going to be seeing me for a long time, and I want to really set that track record good as far as like the dog's experience with this activity, right? So just making sure I'm not rushing anything, not can go through a few don'ts, like don't, be ripping stuff out of a puppy's mouth. Take care of the teeth.
Do not
Take
please
care
don't.
of teeth.
Please.
Like to make sure the puppy is healthy and, and they also understand what's going on. But as far as the progression, it goes like typical rag stuff. Make sure prey drive's there. Make sure the dog's chasing, catching, and holding on to it. Bite it. Ideally, I want the dog biting in the back of its mouth, maybe counter a little bit on the rag. But when I'm on a rag with a puppy, I don't care too much about countering just because like there's nothing to compress really.
Right.
So to me, it's not doing a lot, especially if I have to really work around it as a puppy's like hesitant to counter or whatever. I'm not going to mess around with that.
I feel like it's a mobility exercise too. It's like body awareness.
Yeah. So build the entry, build the strike, build the grip strength just a little bit. Then move to the puppy sleeve. That's where we start working on the grip mechanics, the pushing and everything. And everything I'm going to say, it's like, don't go to the next step until the previous step is relatively perfect, right? I say like, oh, I don't spend that much time on a rag, but it's because it's very easy to teach. Like if I have a puppy in front of me that has drive, I'm teaching it to chase this thing, catch this thing, and bite this thing very quickly, and do that consistently. So as soon as the dog doing that consistently, go onto the puppy sleeve where you can teach it to compress it, bite in the back of its mouth, feel a person. Feeling a person is very important. Like the dog, I want the dog to be feeling a actual person inside of there. And that's going to be like, the foundation of like how they feel when they're biting. You have this opportunity to create like a bite bar inside of the things you're wearing. Why would you not use that to create a stronger, more confident grip? As soon as that's done, then we get to a little bit of environmental exposure. Like I would do this with any dog, not just a PSA dog. If it's like a person protection dog, any other sport, like I want my dog to see different shit. I want them to see the can curtains. I want them to see like going under stuff, over stuff, around stuff, whatever. Just different environmentals. As soon as I know like the grip's good, the dog can pursue things, then we go to environmentals, and that's really where I stay until it's like teething time. Right. And that's where we get to the naughty.
So this is all like pre-teething stuff.
All of this is
running into stressors,
because I'm a firm believer that when you have a puppy, I forgot the actual like scientific window. It's like from 6 weeks to 12 weeks around that area.
Yeah, it's not even 16 weeks. People
Like
say 16
you
weeks.
have such a important window to like genetically ingrain all of this stuff in this dog, right? Their cells and nerve endings aren't fully myelinated, and then you have such opportunity to just knock a bunch of stuff out that you can kind of just set by the side and just the dog has, since it was like 8 weeks old, has seen like can curtains,
But that's like 8 weeks old.
Yeah.
People listening, this is 8 weeks old.
Yeah.
But that's if like the dog kind of comes out of the womb ready to go.
Right. If it's working quality.
Right.
I think a lot of this is based on like if you have a dog,
the ideal
right dog.
the ideal puppy, the right dog. That's why selection is important, and why
I know people like this dog Bagel. Shout out Ava with Pro Canine Chris. Great German Shepherd breeder. Highly recommend. He got off the plane and the next day did bite work, and it was like because he was a pat thing.
Yeah, we did like leaf blowers and shit with him.
Leaf blowers, double cans, all of it. Like sleeve in arm. If you have a dog who wants to bite and is confident, like that's when they are at both. I mean, they have their highest ceiling and they also have their highest floor. Like,
wait, say that again.
They have their highest ceiling and highest floor. So if you have a dog who wants to do all the things, checks all the boxes as far as like they want to pursue, they want to bite as hard as they can, they want to possess it, that's the floor. that's more than a lot of dogs who are
Right,
competing
right,
in
right.
sport are doing already.
For sure.
And then the ceiling is the highest as well because they're just babies who are already doing all of this. So like people saw videos that I was posting, they were like, dude, you're rushing this dog. You're putting way too much pressure.
Oh, you're talking about like the videos we did with Bagel?
And I was like, no, no. If I was rushing the dog wouldn't be doing it. If I was putting too much pressure on the dog wouldn't be doing it. But he's happy. He's fine.
Right.
He's a puppy. He's not going to bite out of anything other than he wants to bite.
Well, people also don't see that that was one session out of the dozens of sets that puppy's going to get at an early age, right? They think that that's that session every single day. And just because they see it once on, Scott's Instagram, they think it's happening every day, and it's not, right? And that's something that everyone should really know is just that it's kind of like a peak. We saw him, he was really excited. Oh, he's in the moment. Let's see, let's build him up a little bit. Let's challenge him. He's getting really excited about the activity. And then later on, the days after that, it's just like, okay, cool. Like come in, run through things here, bite, slip, easy, right? Roll around with him. Oh, you're a big, tough guy. Like versus like what they saw is just that one part of a multi-step process.
I mean, I think one of the biggest mistakes people can make is like thinking about pressure in the body work as a linear progression. So like,
right.
And I know like Mike and I, we've said this at seminars and stuff, but like think about it as like a bodybuilding progression or any sort of workout progression. Like you're going to have like your peak and then deloads. So if you're really aware of cumulative stress and you really track your reps and you really understand like where did your dog start the last session, where did it end, how much stress was put on the dog, how did it work through it, you can really start to be clever about like, okay, I'm going to peak here and then easy bites, easy peasy, whatever. Like, I mean, I know with Esme, I mean, we went wild.
We peaked recently.
we peaked. We went wild with her last week. And then her next set was just like ascend and then she just rolled around.
Yeah.
Like that's all it was. And that's not to say that like your dog can't handle more or needs that, but that's what's healthy. Like that is what's healthy for dogs. Like if they're getting massive cortisol dump and then they're getting put up to just sit there shaking with all the like the massive hormone dump of their body, like all the endorphins flowing through the body, and then they're just sat for 24 hours. If they come out again after finally coming down, and then it's another stress set, like they're just not going to perform at the same level. Like really understanding like what's going on with your dog physiologically when these things happen. So like I said self-awareness at the beginning. So like self-awareness of like what your dog is. So like not only like who your dog is, but also like, okay, so like how much stress is my dog really going through? And then what does that do to them physically? What are the side effects of those stress? And then also like,
what are they feeling too? Like, what are they feeling?
How does my dog perceive stress?
Right.
Some dogs like Mike's dog Uther, like he's unrunnable. Like you can do whatever.
Yeah.
He's still
Every dog can be wrapped. Yeah. Just saying that. Every dog has a ceiling
within the confines of PSA.
Yes.
So like you can't really do anything to that dog within the sport that he plays.
Right.
That is gonna run him. Like it's not like any like the environmental of the box wall or whatever is gonna fuck with him. Like he's just that kind of dog. He's about it. So like it looks like it just washes over him, just rolls down his back and doesn't matter. But that's not true for any dog. Like, I don't care if you have like the biggest banger of all time. Sure, they do it, but it's still stressful. So like understanding like what does stress do to the body? How much stress is my dog feeling?
Compounding stress too, yeah.
What are the signs that I can look for to know that my dog's like approaching their limit of stress? And if you're getting there, you have to deload. And if you're not being responsible as far as tracking your reps, understanding what kind of stress signals your dog individually gives off, because it's not always the same. And then also understanding the real scientific physiological side effects of stress. If you don't understand those things and you're putting your dog through like stress tests or pressure tests and bite work, you're doing your dog a disservice and you're probably taking years off the dog's life.
Right.
So like understanding all of those things is so important when you're going through your progression. Because if we took Bagel out 16 weeks old, fresh off the plane, and did leaf blowers, can curtains, sent him into like a little baby room of doom, and we're like, cool, that's the baseline. Now we're just building off that.
Right.
He'd be spun out like crazy by now. But you do that, you bring him back down. You do that, you bring him back down. I mean, it's,
So like tacking on that, like you described, like deloads are very important, but also knowing the signs when you can kind of push your dog's limit is also equally as important. Like when I see, like we were talking about puppies, like the time I start introducing distractions like leaf blowers, can curtains, whatever the hell. I want to see my puppy like, counter rhythmically several times, without back pressure or something like that, and have like a nice hard grip. I want to see some like evidence that learning is occurring and that I'm having to help less create these things. So like in general, whether it's you're working a puppy or like you're training an adult dog, that's what you should be looking for when you're in the training process and the dog is
Learn behavior.
like
Learn
the
behavior.
dog, the behavior is learned. The dog is needing less help doing it. Push the envelope, push it, push it, push it. Not saying like every time your dog sits nicely, you need to, do some crazy shit with it the next day. But like, look for those signs that the dog is like understanding what's happening. The training plan is progressing. Then you make it harder, 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 harder until you notice like, oh, okay, that was pretty hard for my dog. That was pretty stressful. Let's do that deload.
Right. No, I think people forget about that time. People forget to go back to the foundation skills too.
And that's very, very important for trial prep. That's not talked about enough. You see a ton of seminars labeled trial prep seminars, but nobody's talking about like what is happening, why we do this, and like why we train like this. It's because that is leading up to your dog trialing. Like that is exactly how you prepare your dog for a trial, right? Like that's another thing I tell my club members is please just tell me like 3 months out. Tell me 3 months before you sign up for a trial and we're good. And I can create a training plan to help you peak at the right time.
Right.
That's very important because, any biological being, for the most part, peaks twice a year. And we really want to catch that for our dogs, right? We want to catch that for ourselves, right? So like I going away from dogs, I'm involved in strength sports. Like I'm a power lifter, I'm a strong man. I know for a fact,
I am a strong man.
Strong man. But I know for a fact there is tons of research on humans and a lot with horses and like other animals.
I didn't know that. No.
Like basically you can assume that twice a year, any biological being is at its best. Like twice a year, that tree outside is giving off more oxygen than it would on a normal day. Like every living thing peaks twice a year.
I should brought a notepad.